So, last week I went ahead and I released Why You Should Play Cleric, and the reactions to it were mostly positive, somewhat negative, but there was one comment that seemed to ring out throughout the entire time. And that was the statement that I had kind of bummed people out to play Cleric, which I understand why people feel that way. I spent the majority of the time talking about my religious trauma, and well, yeah, I really needed to get that out there, and I think it was important for context. I do think that I spent a little bit too much time focused on it. It especially bummed me out that I had bummed out people to play the Cleric. That is the exact opposite of the point of my videos, and not at all why I do this. So, what do I do about that? Part 2, baby. We're gonna go in and we're gonna talk about why you really should play Cleric, and hopefully I can get you guys just a little bit more hyped on it. So let's talk about that. I did touch on this on the first video, but I think it's important for context that I go ahead and go over it again just very quickly, and that's the difference between paladins and clerics. As stated previously, paladin is my favorite class, but cleric is kind of a far cry from paladin. Flavor-wise, they are slightly similar, but at the end of the day, the mechanics are just very different. However, flavor-wise, paladins serve themselves to an oath, and clerics serve themselves to a deity or a cause, which are similar but not quite the same, and here's my particular reason of why I think they're so different. An oath follows tenets, strict rules which you must always uphold no matter the situation. It's more like acting in black and white rather than grayscale. Meanwhile, clerics serve a deity or a cause which instead gives specific things that you're supposed to focus on. Concepts, if you will. So this means something along the lines of, a paladin specifically says that you must never harm an innocent creature, while clerics say something more along the lines of, you must uphold a moral compass of those which you would cause harm on. Similar, but not the same. Really, I just see the paladins as more radical and really focused versions of the cleric that don't really work in the grayscale. But clerics are more realistic that the world is not in black and white, it is shades of gray. But with that being said, let's focus a little bit more on the cleric specifically and where their strengths lie. Truthfully, a cleric is a spellcaster at heart. They are a full spellcaster, they go all the way up to 9th level spells if you're so lucky as to get to level 17, and ultimately at the end of the day, they don't really get a ton of class features. It's all focused around the spellcasting. The only other major claim to fame the cleric has is Divine Intervention and Channel Divinity, which are both admittedly really cool, but also just do not come up that often. And so, because of that, the cleric mainly becomes known as a spellcaster, but it's kind of weird that they're known as a spellcaster and yet they're not really seen as that similar to the wizard, who's the premier spellcaster. I mean, they have a strong, distinct difference, and that's outside of just the flavor of being somebody who gets their power from a god or deity, so why is that? Well, the truth is, at the end of the day, clerics are different because, mainly, strangely enough, their proficiencies, and also their spellcasting options. We'll start with their proficiencies though. A lot, and I mean a lot, of different cleric subclasses give you the ability to have heavy armor and weapon proficiencies. You get martial weapons, heavy armor, shields. I mean, seriously, imagine a wizard getting access to those things. Suddenly it is much easier to have higher stats, higher AC, better ways of defending yourself, and you can deal more damage with melee attacks. That's really awesome and already seriously distinguishes yourself. And that just goes ahead and pairs really nicely alongside the cleric spell list, because the spell list for clerics, I'm gonna be real, it's one of my favorites, despite the fact that I'm not the biggest fan of clerics themselves. And it just really complements the fact that they tend to usually be more martial in focus than the wizard or the sorcerer or, any of the other spellcasters. And when I say spellcasters, I mean full spellcasters. To be honest with you, when it comes to just duking it out as a martial, cleric kind of reigns supreme amongst the full spellcasters. Druid can do alright and so can Bard, but cleric just really nails it down. And that really is because of their spell selection. They get access to things like Spiritual Weapon, Bless, Holy Weapon, Spirit Guardians. I mean, all of those are amazing at complementing the ability of being a little bit more of an upfront blaster. And it's funny because clerics were typically known for a long time as the healers. And don't get me wrong, their healing spell list does amazing things as well. They have Prayer of Healing, Cure Wounds, Mass Cure Wounds, the whole shebang. But that is only one of the tools that they can do. They are also amazing damage dealers and just all in all great, awesome tanks and terrifying presences on the battlefield. I really just think their proficiencies match very well with their spell list, and I'm honestly kind of angry that the cleric gets so many good spells. It really feels like Wizards of the Coast spent a lot of time on the cleric spell list over all the others to make sure that they felt unique in their spell list. I think if the sorcerer got the same treatment, they would feel way more unique than they do. And of course, as always, all of this is aside from the subclasses. In the previous video, I did talk about the subclasses very, very briefly, but I said I wasn't going to go over them because there were just too many, and that's the truth. But the subclasses can really nail down how you feel when playing these characters. Seriously, based on your subclass choice, it very much changes how your character feels. Are you going to go War Domain? Okay, well then you're going to feel very much like a martial class. Want to go Arcana Domain? Alright, well suddenly you're much more of a wizard feel. In a lot of ways, it's a lot like the Bard in where it feels like there's a subclass for every single type of archetype you want to play. If you want to feel like one of the other classes while playing a cleric, there is something for you. And this is complemented with the channel divinities. Each subclass gets a special channel divinity that is specifically related to your deity. And a lot of them are really, really cool. Like for example, the Tempest domain gets a channel divinity called Destructive Wrath, which basically when you use it, it allows you to go ahead and maximize any damage when you were rolling lightning or thunder damage. Automatic max damage. That's super cool. And yeah, all cleric subclasses kind of get the same abilities generally across sort of things, like for example, Divine Strike. At 8th level, when you're playing a cleric, you're going to go ahead and get an ability either called Divine Strike or Potent Spellcasting. And basically what it does is it either buffs your melee attacks or it goes ahead and it buffs your spell attacks. I mean, honestly, it's not the best thing in the world, but it really helps nail down what you can do. And there actually is some options in Tasha's that allows you to choose between the two, and I think that's really cool. But the point that I'm trying to make is pretty much based off of what you want to do. You can just make a really powerful character with a lot of flavor based off of your subclass. And that leads me into a point that I had a hard time making in the last video on clerics. But why do I think you should play clerics? I've already talked about why I have a problem with them. I also talked about why I've played actually a few clerics, but ultimately I realized reading through the comments and just thinking about the whole thing, I had kind of missed something. A lot of people talked in the comments about the fact that my issues with the cleric were real and they were legitimate, and that actually meant a lot to me. Yes, a lot of people have given me backlash for what I said, and a lot of people got bummed out by the cleric, which I'm genuinely sorry for. But it really did mean a lot that people seemed to resonate with what I said and, you know, didn't hate me for it. But all those comments also said something particular. They talked about the fact that they understood that that was something that could happen to people. They could have that rough experience with the religion, but that's not what the cleric was about. The cleric isn't necessarily about the religion. They're about the journey that they partake in trying to live up to their ideals. Much like the paladin. Yeah, maybe you have a god, maybe you don't, maybe you have a cause, maybe you don't, but at the end of the day, you've chosen something that you want to uphold and you're fighting to do that. You're gaining powers from doing it, sure, but you're trying to uphold something. You're trying to do something better. You're trying to make a difference. And at the end of the day, I mean, come on, that's awesome. That's exactly why I started this channel, is because I wanted to make a difference in the D&D community. So I'm kind of upset with myself for missing that about the cleric. I think it was necessary for me to rant in order to be able to get it all out there, but now I really do see cleric in a different light. When you choose to play a cleric, you get to decide, hey, I'm going to play a character who is upholding themselves to a different standard, who is trying to make a difference, who has gone out and has chosen that there is something that they need to change. That's really cool. And not only are they doing that, it's not them against the world. They have a deity behind them. They have something that's going to help. They have something which they can try and call upon using divine intervention to try and get an assistance. They're not alone. It's not them against the world. They have hope. They know that there's somebody that believes in them and they believe in return. And you know what? I really like that. I really want that. That's something that I think is a really fun flavor that I think people should go for. It's a good fantasy, and I think the class does it well. Mechanics and all. So, to all you cleric lovers out there, hopefully I've managed to redeem myself, and I do apologize for the last video. I think it was necessary. I think I said what I needed to say, but I think it definitely needed this follow-up. So go out and play a cleric, you beautiful bastards. Don't let what I said get you down. Go out into the world and make it your own, and never forget to play a role. Thank you. Come again.